Hi, this is Miss Hammonds. This is AP1 Bio 2113. This is a continuation of Chapter 4's lecture. You should have your Part B guided notes, delivering fabric, in order to support you as you go through this information. So, connective tissues is the most abundant and most widely distributed tissue within the body. As you go through your guided notes, you will identify some of the major functions associated with connective tissues. Some functions is that it binds things together, supports and strengthens other body tissues. It protects, insulates internal organs, and stores fuel. It compartmentalizes structures such as skeletal tissues and stores reservoir fuel. And it's transport blood substances. There are four main classes of connective tissues. That is connective tissue proper, cartilage, bone, and blood. And we will look at each type. Of the common characteristics, all of the connective tissues have a common origin. They have varying degrees of vascularity, and they have an extracellular matrix. So for common tissue origin, all have a mesenchyme, which is usually an embryonic tissue type. It's loosely associated with the cells that lack polarity and are surrounded by large extracellular matrix. Mesenchymal cells are able to develop into the tissues of the lymphatic circulatory system, as well as connective tissues located throughout the body, and in some cases, bone and cartilage as well. The degree of vascularity, so blood vessels, all have a rich supply of blood except the dense connective tissue, which is poorly vascularized. Cartilage also is avascular, but bone has a rich supply of blood cells. For the extracellular matrix, connective tissue is a collection of cells that are arranged within an extracellular matrix, that gives shape, structure, and support to other body tissues. Matrix is important in structure support, but they do not bear weight. They do not withstand tension or endure any other type of abuse associated with any other tissues. They are not enduring tissue types. Some examples of the extracellular matrix would be fibroblast. These are cells that are produced and secrete a protein such as collagen and elastin. They're present in every type of connective tissue except blood. The matrix itself is non-living extracellular protein fibers surrounding liquid. They have a jelly-like or solid material. Some examples are collagen, elastin, and then any of the surrounding material. There are three main elements of connective tissues. These elements will vary based on the location of the connective tissue. They are ground substance, fibers, and in some cases, some additional cells. But of the three, the primary two are ground substance and fiber. Ground substance is an unstructured material that fills the space between cells and contains the additional fibers. It's composed of an interstitial fluid that has adhesion proteins and proteoglycans. Cell adhesion proteins act as glue that allow the connective tissues to attach to the matrix elements. Ground substance consists of large amounts of fluid and functions as a molecular sieve or medium through which nutrients and other dissolved substances can diffuse between blood capillaries and through the cells. As we look at connective tissue fibers, there are three fiber types associated with connective tissues. They are collagen, elastic, and reticular. Collagen fibers are composed of a large amount of matrix. Of the three types, the collagen fiber is the strongest and most abundant. Collagen is tough, provides high tensile strength due to the presence of the collagen, and it resists pulling apart. Elastic fibers are networks of long, thin elastin fibers that allow for stretch and recoiling. Elastin is a rubber-like protein that is thin and extends from the extracellular matrix. Reticular fibers are short, fine, and highly branched collagenous fibers. They're found surrounding blood vessels and often are in places of support to soft tissue organs. Reticular fibers are located in branching and forming networks that offer more give in the areas of their location. And then this slide is very similar to the reticular slide that we have in the lab. If you look at the structures, try to not be so focused on the coloring of the slides that you view. When we start our histology portion in lab, you want to be looking at structures that are present. All right, so connective tissue cells. In this class of connective tissue, it has what is referred to as the resident cell type that exists both in an immature and mature form. Blast cells are actively mitotic cells that secrete the ground substance and the fibers that make up the matrix of connective tissue. So earlier we talked about the three components. They were ground substance, fibers, and cells, but the main two structures that are associated with connective tissue are ground substance and fibers. Blast cells, again, are actively mitotic. They are constantly in the production of new cell matrix. Blast cells include connective tissue proper, fibroblasts. In cartilage, they are chondroblast. In bone, they are osteoblast. And in blood, they're hematopoietic stem cells. When blast cells finish secreting their matrix, they become mature cells, and they change the name from blast to cytes. Some additional types of cells would be fat cells, also referred to as adipocytes. They store nutrients. We have white blood cells that respond to tissue injury. Mast cells, that's the primary function of detecting foreign microorganisms. They initiate the inflammatory response. And then you have macrophages, which phagocytize foreign molecules and particles, and they are also associated with your immune system. So here's an organizational chart or graphic organizer of the different types of connective tissues. Connective tissues can be proper or specialized. Those that we've just discussed primarily are proper. No, we haven't. We talked about specialized because we looked at bone, compact, cartilage, and so on and so forth. So let's look at some of the connective tissue proper. They are in two subclasses. The term proper means that it performs specialized functions, usually those with a protective function or some type of support. In the two subclasses, there are the loose connective tissues. Those are areolar, adipose, and reticular. Then you have the dense connective tissues, which are dense, regular, dense, irregular, and then elastic. In this particular imagery, we have the fibrocytes that are located, which are those dark areas here. You have your adipocyte, which is the fat cell present in here, and then it shows you the mesenchymal cell, where the different types of cells are derived from. Fibroblasts produce the fibrous tissue. Connective tissue proper includes the fixed cells, fibrocytes, adipocytes, and mesenchymal cells, which we identified in the image. So areolar tissue. Their primary function is to support and bind other tissues, defend against infection, hold body fluids. A primary type present in areolar tissue is a fibroblast. Edema is associated with areolar tissues. Edema occurs when the body region is inflamed and the areolar tissue in that area becomes like sponges and it soaks up the fluid that's being created. This makes the area puffy, swollen, which is what we refer to as edema. Areolar connective tissue is the most widely distributed connective tissue type in the body. Unlike the epithelial tissues, I did not provide a chart for you to follow along with and provide locations in the body, but I do encourage you to become familiar with specifically areolar, adipose, and reticular tissue types. So adipose, also referred to as the fat tissue, is similar to areolar in its structure and function, but its nutrient storing ability is greater. The cell types are these large structures. These are your adipocytes. Adipose tissue usually accumulates in a subcutaneous tissue where it acts as a shock absorber, an insulator, or a storage site for energy. Reticular connective tissue is found mostly in lymphoid tissue, so your lymph nodes, the spleen, and bone marrow. They form a stoma, or what is referred to as an internal framework, to support free blood cells in the area of their location. So here, the darker areas are your reticular fibers. This is a section of the spleen. Again, it's very similar to the slides that we have in lab class. As far as the cell type, fibroblast may also be referred to as reticular cells. All right, so dense regular connective tissue is closely packed bundles of cartilage fibers. They run in the same direction, or they are either parallel to the direction of the pool. Dense regular connective tissue has very few cells and is poorly vascularized. This type of cell is a fibroblast. Remember, blasts produce new matrix. Cytes are the mature cells that maintain the matrix. It's arrangements of many collagen fibers that give us great tensile strength. So dense irregular connective tissue has the same structural elements as the regular connective tissue, except the bundles of collagen fibers are thicker and are arranged irregularly. So there's no parallel structure, they're just in there. Dense irregular connective tissue is found in areas where tension is exerted in many different directions. And they also have the fibroblasts that produce the new matrix. Looking at dense regular versus irregular connective tissue, it shows you the two different slides. And so remember, in the regular, we said that they run parallel towards the pool of what they're receiving, whereas in irregular dense tissue, they're just kind of all over the place. There's no rhyme or reason as far as how the structures are laid out. So elastic connective tissue is another type of dense regular connective tissue. This is the type that stands the stretch and recoil. It also is associated with fibroblasts. Primary functions is that it allows tissue to recoil after stretching, maintains a pulsate flow of blood through the arteries, aids in passive recoiling of lungs following inspiration. Some locations are the walls of the arteries, vertebral column, and bronchial tubes. So now we're going to look at cartilage. Cartilage stands up to both tension and compression. It is tough, but it is flexible. Cartilage lacks nerve fibers, and it is avascular. It receives its nutrients by diffusion from blood vessels and the connective tissue membrane surrounding, and is called a perichondrium. So the surrounding portion of connective tissue around the cartilage is the perichondrium. Cell types associated with cartilage are chondroblast and chondrocytes. Remember, we said blasts produce new matrix in the growing of new cartilage, and chondrocytes are the mature cells that maintain that matrix. They are found in shallow pits called lacunae. Hyaline cartilage is the most abundant cartilage located in the body, contains a large amount of cartilage fibers, and the cell type associated with it are chondrocytes. Remember, cytes are the mature cells. Most of the embryonic skeleton is made of hyaline cartilage before bone is formed. Primary functions of hyaline cartilage is that it supports and reinforces and serves as resilient cushions that resist compressive stress. So elastic cartilage has a similar appearance as hyaline cartilage, but the elastic fibers are more easily visible. Their cell type is a chondrocyte. So here is elastic, here is hyaline cartilage. So both of them have those chondrocytes that are present. Those are these large little structures here. And then these are your chondrocytes located within the elastic. Two things you need to remember is that elastic cartilage is located in the external ear or the pinna, the epiglottis, and in the structure of the nose. Fibrocartilage has rows of collagen fibers that alternate with the rows of chondrocytes. And fibrocartilage is a compressible resistance tension as well. And then this is just the structure of fibrocartilage. Next, we're looking at bone, which is another type of connective tissue. It is also referred to as osseous tissue. It's made of collagen fibers and calcium salts, and those salts are what make bone hard. Some types of cells associated with bone are osteoblasts, which again, blasts produce matrix, and then osteocytes, which maintain the matrix. They also reside in the lacunae. Blood is another type of connective tissue. Blood is classified as a connective tissue because it develops from mesenchyme cells, and it consists of blood cells surrounded by a fluid matrix called plasma. There are a few cell types associated with blood. We have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Next type of tissue is muscular tissue. They are highly cellular and well vascularized tissues that are responsible for most types of body movements. Muscle tissue contains myofilaments, one made from actin and one made from myosin. And these myofilaments bring about the muscle contraction. As we go into other chapters, we will look more into those types of cells. Skeletal muscles are bundles of muscle cells called muscle fibers. Skeletal muscles are voluntary, meaning that they move by a neurological impulse. They don't just move on their own. Skeletal muscle cells are multinucleated. The fibers are striated due to the arrangements of the myofilaments that we just discussed. And then so here's a slide of skeletal tissue. Next, we have cardiac muscle tissue. They are found in the walls of the heart. Cardiac cells are uninucleated. They are striated due to the microfilaments as well, but they contain intercalated discs, which are like desmosomes. They hold those structures together, and it is associated with an involuntary movement. And so here you see these little line structures. Those are your intercalated discs. Smooth muscles have no striations, but they do have myofilaments as well. They are uninucleated. Cells are spindle-shaped and occur in sheets. They are also involuntary. So most of the body organs, with the exception of the heart and muscles associated with body movement, are smooth muscle tissue type, located mainly in the walls of hollow organs. And then next we have nervous tissue. This tissue of the nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cords and their nerves. Some of the types of cells are neuroglia, which are support cells, neurons, which are the cells that generate and conduct impulses. Each neuron contains processes that respond to a stimuli. These processes are called dendrites. Each neuron contains a process called an axon that transmits impulses within the body. So these structures are your dendrites. This entire blue thing is called the cell body. The extension that has a covering of the node of Ranabover, the Schwann cells and the myelin sheaths, they link the cell body to the axon terminals, is referred to as the axon. My bad. Okay. All right, and then here is an image of a neuron that is similar to what you would see in your lab. Again, locations will be the brain, spinal cord, and nerves, both peripheral and central nerves. Next, we're looking at covering and lining membranes. There are 3 covering and lining membranes within the body. That is the cutaneous membrane, the mucosous membrane, and the serosus membrane. These membranes consist of at least 2 primary tissue types, that is the epithelium and connective tissue proper. So in this diagram, you have the cutaneous, which is the body covering or the skin. The mucosous membranes are located in the respiratory and digestive tracts. You have your serosus membranes that are in the pleural cavities and in the peritoneal cavities. And then finally, synovial, which would be in free-moving joints, produce a rich hyaluronic acid. It made me think of that lady on that commercial. She was like hyaluronic, talking about the product that's in it that helps plump your skin. All right, and so finally we get to steps in tissue repair. Tissue repair requires that cells divide and migrate. Activities that are initiated by growth factors, wounds, and hormones release injured cells. Repair occurs in 2 major ways. Regeneration, which replaces the destroyed tissue with the same kind of tissue, or fibrous. And a fibrous connective tissue proliferates to form scars. Here are the steps of the tissue repair. So if there's torn tissue located on the skin, of course, bleeding occurs. Then a type of clotting will be caused by proteins and plasma proteins. At some point, a scab will also form as the inflammatory chemicals are released due to that injury. Again, white blood cells are also associated with tissue repair. The epithelial cells will multiply and fill in over the granulation tissue, which was the scab. And then at some point, the epithelial tissue will thicken and be restored until it matures into its contracts. All right, guys, so that concludes Chapter 4B. Hopefully you were able to follow along with your guided notes. At the end of the notes, I provided you with a few questions. I'm just going to go through the answers. So question number 1, you should have selected C, blood vessels. Question number 2, you should have selected C, osseous tissue. Question number 3, you should have selected C, hemocytoblast. I promise you it's just a coincidence. Question number 4, you should have selected B like Bobby, fibers and ground substances. And that one is a little tricky because when we talked about connective tissue matrix, it listed ground substance, fibers, and cells. But remember, I repeatedly stated that the primary connective tissue matrix is composed of fibers and ground substances. So please make note of that. And then finally, epithelial tissues, or A, is the answer to the last question. I hope that you found this helpful, and good luck on exam 1.